in an innovative way for the benefit of our environment, our people, and of course, ultimately to connect with a more curious and informed consumer. In this week, we have a great lineup of guests, as always, across a variety of sectors and, of course, countries around the world as well. Sarah's Country has a global audience, and we're very proud of how far we've grown and connecting with the stories that you are enjoying. I'm getting a lot of feedback that Changemaker is one of the favourites with you, so one that we want to continue to grow. And, of course, email me, sarah@sarahscountry.com, if you have any guests or topics that you'd like to hear more about or showcase within the show. So coming up, we're going to head to the US. So we heard from Dave Maslin from New Zealand Merino a couple of weeks back in Sarah's Country, how the organisation is finding a way to accredit regenerative practices. This is because it is now being demanded by consumers, regardless of what we're doing here in New Zealand or not. And so I reached out to the Savory Institute. You may be familiar with Alan Savory, his TED Talk Into the Millions, featuring on Kiss the Ground. Well, Chris Kerston's going to join us. He's a rancher and farmer, and he's also involved with their accreditation program called Land to Market, where they are being able to find a way utilising scientific research methodology as well as principles to audit and provide accreditation around regenerative practices. Chris is a very, very insightful and interesting man, and he'll outline the work that he's doing closely with New Zealand. So very inspiring coming up within the show. Now, I also am joined by a retired professor from the University of Otago who's been working closely with a doctoral student from the Department of Zoology, and they've been able to uncover a really unique, naturally occurring compound that may be able to help kill off the varroa mite. So they've been working internationally with French researchers as well. It's a great piece of research, and now they're on to the implementation phase to be able to give beekeepers the tools that they need against that deadly disease. To close the show, we are joined by Melissa Slattery, who is the chair of the Dairy Environment Leaders, who have come together in Wellington this week. They've had speakers such as Climate Change Commissioner Dr. Rod Carr speak to them. And I want to get Melissa's thoughts on what they heard within that group within Wellington, and what the Dairy Environment Leaders Forum is doing to respond to the pressures of climate change and water quality regulations to of course maintain a profitable and sustainable business all at the same time. To kick off, we're going to head to a place just out of Auckland, and they have just taken out 9 gold awards in the New Zealand Cheese Awards. This isn't from your average dairy cow or even sheep milk. We are going to be speaking to Helen Dorresteyn from Clevedon Buffalo Company. Absolutely incredible story around their journey milking buffalo in New Zealand, and what her thoughts are on supporting small artisan producers and why it's important in the face of what could be an increase of imported products flooding our markets, particularly in the cheese market. Helen's going to join us up next here, kicking off Sarah's Country's Changemaker.
This is Sarah's Country, produced in alliance with Farmers Weekly, the place New Zealand farmers turn to for a trusted source of in-depth agricultural journalism. Stay connected to the matters that matter most by subscribing to My Daily Digest at farmersweekly.co.nz.
Oh, nice boots.
Yeah, thanks. They're new.
Ben, you alright?
Oh, yeah, sorry mate. Just meerkatting pretty hard, eh? Yeah, I just said to myself, Ben, work hard. You deserve new boots.
Kicking off Sarah's Country's Changemaker this week as the first to farm buffalo in New Zealand. Cleaning up at this year's Cheese Awards with 9 gold medals is the Dorresteyn family, Helen and Richard, who provide artisan award-winning fresh buffalo mozzarella, ricotta, yogurt, my apologies, and marinated buffalo cheese. My mouth was watering as I was reading it. They own a 200 head of buffalo farm just south of Auckland on the shores of Haraki Gulf with their brand Clevedon Buffalo Company. And Helen joins us now on Sarah's Country. Firstly, congratulations, Helen. But you're an old stalwart to the artisan food market here in New Zealand. Of course, being involved with the Cleveland Village Farmers Market as well. So this is all in your stride.
Well, no, it's been a journey, but it's all part and parcel of it, and really gratifying to win these awards, and it's all about farm to table where we're concerned. We love what we do. My husband's on the farm at the moment. He loves it. Couldn't be happier. And we take great pride in what we make. It's a privilege. Yeah.
I'm absolutely fascinated about buffalo, but I have something to tell you. My mum actually has some buffalo. Would you believe it?
No, I wouldn't be surprised, because we bought the first milking herd in, so we were the first to milk and make cheese, but there were swamp buffalo on the west coast of the South Island in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and they brought them in as part of a looking at doing the meat, but that didn't occur. So our buffalo are slightly different. They're Mediterranean, so different colour, and you get more milk. You only get about 1 litre or so out of a swamp, and you'd have to be pretty game to get in there and milk her, to be honest.
They're like most cattle on the west coast, pretty damn wild.
Beautiful place though, isn't it?
Oh, it's stunning. It's stunning. And she can't get them out because they just need to continue to run with the cows, and they're just there for life, really.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've all got animals tucked away on our farms like that, haven't we, really? Life is.
Yeah. And before I get into, I really want to understand around what it's like to farm milking buffalo. But I do have to ask you, are you as big a fan of Yellowstone as I am on Neon?
Yellowstone, I don't even know.
You need to watch it. It's got Kevin Costner, so of course, farming buffalo in Montana.
Oh, right. But they would be bison. So they've got the big shoulders, big shoulders and no hips, Whereas ours are milking buffalo, so they're more chunky. They're like a hippo on big legs. There
we go. A great way to explain exactly the type of animal that you are farming there, because it make you allude to different descriptions of the animal, because we are here in New Zealand disconnected to buffalo. It's not a common thing at all. What would be the total national herd?
Oh gosh, I don't know now. I mean, people have been breeding up a storm. We haven't really increased our numbers so much as increased our quality of our herd over the last 15 years. So just breeding for milkiness. A good way to explain that, when we started milking, we were getting 3 litres a day. Now we're getting 9. So it's a big change just with genetics and breeding, handling and so on. That's twice the solids with the buffalo too, you see. So they stack up quite well at our end of the journey. In the beginning, we thought we were going broke very, very quickly, 3 litres is not much milk.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the infrastructure of the dairy industry, have you been able to benefit from technology in the dairy industry, dairy cow industry, for what you're doing and adapting that?
Well, we've adapted, but we needed to go. We went to Italy and we bought equipment in and we adapt. My husband was a Sparky, so he's got good trade contacts and also understands all that stuff. So he made all of our original machinery, because we started off with just 5 girls in the shed. So we've gone from very, very small scale production to we're still small in the big scheme of things, but much bigger production. So we've had to scale up our machinery as cheaply as possible as we go, and his technical abilities have enabled us to do that without costing us an arm and a leg. But there's specific equipment we use for the mozzarella which just wasn't available here. So we went to Italy to buy the machinery we use now, but our initial stuff, that when we were making it by hand in the early days, came back in my suitcase from Italy instead of shoes, which was a real bummer.
Oh, and I mean, of course, sadly, not being able to just jump on a plane and go to Italy. We've got COVID in the mix, but absolutely incredible for local domestic consumers wanting to be more connected to local producers, something you'd see through the farmers market, and of course Clevedon Buffalo company as well.
Yes, well, it's vital. It's vital for us to sell locally. We actually did export briefly, but it was because mozzarella sits in a water brine. We were basically flying to get it there fresh, because that's the big thing about it. It needs to be fresh. We were flying it to Australia, and we were flying equal quantities of brine and cheese. So it wasn't a valid exercise, particularly when they bring it in snap frozen from Italy. It's not as nice, but it's much cheaper when you snap freeze it and bring it in from Italy. So it was a very, very hard proposition. So our whole reason for bringing in a herd of buffalo was to make a fresh cheese. You can't fly in fresh mozzarella. Well, you can, but you'll be mortgaging your house to buy it. So it was to have the milk fresh to the farm, to the factory, to make the freshest possible mozzarella, which is what you'll have on the Amalfi Coast, and is what is such a delicious memory for so many people that have been to Italy. Yeah. But it was a lot of fun going over to learn how to make it, I can tell you.
So how do you structure your business in regards to yourself and your husband's involvement, as well as your wider team, to have that pasture to plate story?
Well, we've got probably about 9 staff now. We have 2 on the farm, a full-time farm manager and relief milker, and my husband spends every breathing minute down there too, that he's not in the cheese factory. So I always know where to find him. But and then we've got 4 or 5 staff in the factory. We have got a core staff of 4 who are really important to us. They're our keystone staff members, and they're really involved in the company, and they're really into each role that they perform. And they've grown. As the company's grown, we've been able to bring those people on because, we're getting a bit longer in the tooth and we need some help now. Yeah.
So part of our Changemaker series is really understanding what those who are making change makes them tick and motivates them to want to do things differently. How did yourself and your husband sort of go down this path, and why are you, what makes you sort of get those feet on the floor every morning and pushes you in your purpose to do so?
Well, quite simply, we love food, absolutely love food, and we like good food, healthy food. So we garden a lot, grow most of our vegetables, and what we don't grow, we buy at the market. And I just love food. And we had mozzarella together in Italy before we started this project, and it was just beautiful. It's just a beautiful cheese, a beautiful milk to work with, and quite frankly, it started off as the mozzarella story, but it's become so much more with the marinated cheese, where Richard's now building a blue room, which is really exciting. It's just a love of good food, and actually when you're in that area, particularly with the farmers market, like the stall holders, the growers and farmers, they're our tribe, they're people that sort of understand seasons, understand the land, understand growing. It's a really nice area to work in, yeah. And we love the fresh food and couldn't do it any other way, yeah.
And in a parting comment, what could the New Zealand food, production system, our primary industries, our regulators, our government, our scientists do to support the growth of this industry?
Wow, a lot, really, to be honest. I mean, I really feel for small cheesemakers. I mean, it's been a really hard struggle. I mean, we've been around long enough now, and we have a significant enough point of difference that I'm reasonably confident we will survive. But I think if you're a small producer producing a handcrafted product, and you're paying more than a living wage, because most of our people are on well above minimum wage now, much more, it's very hard to make ends meet when you're competing against cheeses and so on coming in from overseas made by people on €2 an hour. You can't do it. So I think that New Zealand as a whole needs to realise that there is something very real we will lose if we lose our ability to manufacture things, and that goes right across all the primary sector. So not just dairy. I'm talking about making things out of wood. I mean, why are we exporting logs? In such quantities, and we've lost the ability to, if we lose, because we're so small that we could become artisan producers to the world in a really lovely place for people to come and live and visit, where we produce top quality added value things, not just, tonnage of things, which isn't good for our landscape.
While I've got you there, how are you getting on with the EU's geographical indicators around the use of the names of the products whilst that's on the table with negotiations?
Nothing's really been affecting us yet. I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, really. We'll just call it damn good Kiwi cheese, I guess.
Love your attitude. Hey, and congratulations on the 9 gold medals in the recent New Zealand Cheese Awards. Helen Dorresteyn, Dorresteyn, like Einstein, my apologies, from the Clevedon Valley Buffalo Company, and of course one of the founders of the Cleveland Farmers Market as well. Absolutely inspiring words there, and what a great story. So after the break, something I uncovered is around the regenerative accreditation of meat, dairy and wool that is being based from the Savory Institute. It's called Land to Market, and Kerston will join us from the US to understand how they are accrediting a product to capitalise on the growing trend of regenerative for their farmers and growers, and what we can learn here in New Zealand.
This is Sarah's Country. Catch the latest on the matters that matter most wherever you are. Listen to Sarah's Country on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple or Google Podcasts. Try asking Alexa or Siri. Play Sarah's Country on podcast.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here
is where to shop for the things you need to live out here.
Like electric fencing.
Or horse feed.
Or bee suits.
Children.
Chook food.
Do you want a couple of these?
Or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this.
But at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help your farm,
grow, milk, dredge.
rear, come on in.
Because we're out here too.
Well, the conversation is happening here right now in New Zealand. We've heard from Dave Maslin from New Zealand Merino around the accreditation that they are doing in regenerative agricultural practices that may already be existing here in New Zealand, because brands around the world are asking for it. And in a bit of research, I found out that this has been going on for some time. If you haven't watched Alan Savory's TED Talk on YouTube, please do Google it and have a listen if you're unfamiliar with him. You will also see him in the Netflix series Kiss the Ground. And so regenerative, whether we here in New Zealand understand or agree with whether we're doing it here or not, park that to the side, it is extremely popular with our consumers. And so therefore, in verifying the practices and ticking that box for the consumer, the Savory Institute has gone down a program that is known as Land to Market. It's a new standard for verifying land health to the consumer that has been developed in collaboration with leading scientists and researchers around the world. Now, the Savory Institute is using a soil and landscape assessment methodology that tracks outcomes in soil health, biodiversity and ecosystem function. Our next guest is going to give us a valuable perspective on how regenerative agriculture is growing in demand, but how more so they are capturing that value for their farmers and ranchers in the US, and what we can learn here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So I welcome the US-based Land to Market Program Manager, Kerston. Welcome, Chris. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, Chris, could you give us a bit of a background, because you are a full-time rancher and you have co-managed a 2,000-acre diverse farm in the Sacramento Valley, and sadly just lost your home to the wildfires. What's life like for you farming in the US?
Yeah, it's changed a lot over the last couple decades. I think that we've put a lot of energy and a lot of my career has been focused on creating supply chains that are able to differentiate what's happening on the farm and connecting the farmer to the consumer on shared values. So it's a wild time in light of the challenges that we're facing around weather and climate change, and all of those continue to be issues for everyone around the world. But at the same time, there's opportunities that are opening up with brand partners, retail partners, and ultimately driven by the consumer that's interested in knowing more about where their food comes from and connecting on the things that are important to them.
What was the changing point for you in your farming career to go down the path you're on?
Yeah, there was a few. It's hard to break it down to just one. But I think a lot of it was lack of resilience of, these commodity oligarchies. You don't have a lot of control in them. And so to be able to be part of a differentiated program, we went more direct to consumer really early on in that game, and being able to but it taught me a lot about how the industry, particularly around red meat, is changing and where there are opportunities there.
And this has attracted a lot of attention from some public figures, and it's really put you on a pedestal as a leader in both, of course, the regenerative scene, but also around tourism and connection through experience with the consumers as well. What's the roller coaster been like for you personally?
Yeah, the marketplace for regenerative is just exploding. We started this out thinking this was predominantly going to be a red meat play, and it's been surprising how much has involved pet food and particularly apparel. The amount of work that we're doing around wool and skins and hides is huge. So it's exciting to see different industries kind of coming to the same conclusion at the same time, that there's kind of two drivers for why industry is changing. One is that consumer values piece that we already kind of touched on. The others is this scope 3 accounting, this notion of brands should be held accountable for more of the impact that happens along their value chain or along their supply chain. And so society is starting to hold them more accountable for those impacts, which means they want more transparency and traceability back to farm. And they're actually seeing the farmer as an opportunity to leverage change, to create positive change where their non-biological systems can't have a net positive results. The biological ones can.
It's an interesting one because here in New Zealand, right down the bottom of the world, where some people in your country don't know where we are extremely disconnected to the brands you're speaking of, which is like Timberland. And here for us, Icebreaker on Allbirds shoes, which are large in the US. We are disconnected with this trend. But the thing is, Chris, if New Zealand doesn't help contribute to that, another country will simply fill that, won't they?
Yeah, that's just it. And I love New Zealand. I think I've been something like 5-6 times in the last 3 years. Spent a lot of time driving around and have flown out of feels like every regional airport, and certainly both internationals a number of times. And I think the opportunity for Kiwis to differentiate in this space is really unparamounted. There's only a few places in the world that really present the opportunity that New Zealand has. I do think there needs to be an acknowledgement of some change in management practices need to occur. I think that there needs to be an acknowledgement of things like overfert and water quality for certain producers. But by and large, as a country, as an opportunity, there's just so much there. And particularly for such a large red meat exporter, livestock has a target on its back in the world. That even though that these are still important ingredients and mediums for lots of brands, the general zeitgeist is moving away from livestock products, that plant-based everything is becoming the trend. We wanted to shift that narrative. And so what we built in this ecological outcome verification scientific protocol was a way to be practice agnostic. There are practices and management tools to get you to regenerative, but we're not measuring that. We want to go measure the actual outcomes on the land. So we're looking at soil organic matter, and we're looking at water infiltration, and we're looking at sequestered carbon, and we're looking at biodiversity, because we want to be able to build that data set to go to the world and say, listen, livestock belong on this planet for a reason. These species are here. They naturally existed in grassland ecosystems. And if you want to maintain a grassland, there's a synergy between a grassland and a grazer that can and is having net positive results at scale all around the world. But to do that, we need empirical data to show that, to be able to quantify what's happening on the ground and look at an aggregate of ecosystem services, not a single variable like just carbon alone, but carbon plus other aspects. And that actually creates a lot of opportunities for market differentiation and options for new asset classes that are developing of things like ecosystem service credits for carbon, water, and biodiversity credits that didn't exist just a handful of years ago, that now could make a significant amount, a portion of the revenue coming into a farm operation based on the positive things that they're providing to society.
Huge amount of ideas coming out of that. Ecosystem credits, it's absolutely fantastic. And it's interesting too, because we yesterday spoke on the Opinion Maker show around New Zealand's energy story and how we're nearly 100% renewable, and utilising energy in a synthetic nutritional, producing synthetic meat is a huge use of energy, and how we can actually, do as nature intended it. That's all we're doing, Chris, absolutely. The likes of the trends, I mentioned Kiss the Ground with Woody Harrelson narrating it on Netflix. For me, that was a game changer for people understanding that the world doesn't have to move to plant-based proteins. How transformational is that type of communication style, and particularly in the US market?
Yeah, I think it's just getting bigger all the time. It kind of started with that paleo primal, there's another group called Weston Price that doesn't get as much notoriety, but it was groups that were really focusing on ancestral foods. And they broke through some of those health barriers first, showing that a diet high in red meat can be healthy for you. And then it just paved the way for that narrative to consumers to say, well, wouldn't it just make sense that if it's healthy for the eater, that it would also be healthy to raise when done correctly? And so I think we're seeing more of that from celebrities. The big thing that we see from brands is so much of their IP or their point of difference is built around these ingredients or these materials. When you're talking about a hide, I don't care who you are, a plant-based leather, a mushroom leather, a pineapple leather, whatever it is they're cooking up in labs these days, none of those things have that same warmth, that same durability, that same structure of a leather hide. These companies don't want to lose those things, but they're trying to respond to their customers. And so when we can facilitate connection and show, no, there actually is these positive things happening at the farm level, we can track that through a supply chain and help the brand access that supply, tell that story, differentiate it correctly, have impact accounting metrics with it. It really becomes a turnkey solution for them.
I'd love to understand how the land to market program works for implementation with your farmers and ranchers. What's the sort of process to accreditation that the farm or ranch would go down?
Yeah, so super different from like a welfare program or certified organic. Again, we're just going out and measuring practices. So we're trying to take as much burden off the farmer as possible and offer them as many new opportunities as possible. So typically we're looking for like map files in advance, or what they call KML files. We're going to look at that mapping and we're going to create a system plan for how we're going to go and measure that landscape. So where we're going to put long-term transects, and where we're going to do monitoring for what we call leading indicators that show year-over-year trends that we're heading towards some big goals. That's really it. All of that is done in advance. We measure farms the same way all around the world. We normalize it to a given ecoregion that kind of calibrates our expectations and sets what we know is possible in that region, normalizes for weather. And then we have trained monitors come out and actually go out and do those measurements. So it's a mixture of some qualitative scoring and some empirical analysis that goes out for laboratory results. We have a cadre of monitors already in New Zealand we have a relationship with a group there called Ataland, or Ataland Regeneration. Google them and find them. Their headquarters is in Taupo, but they work across both islands. We have a long relationship with a very big station in Lees Valley outside of Christchurch, and we have a number of lamb producers coming on board through Atkins Ranch, so out of the Napier area and throughout that whole north, central, east coast on the North Island there. So there's resources in place. If someone's interested in this, they can reach out to us through Savory Institute or through Ataland, and we can set up and kind of walk somebody through what it looks like to come out and have somebody monitor their land. But there's very little upfront work for them. It's just going out and actually measuring those ecosystem services.
Thank you so much for giving some tangible examples here in New Zealand. And Atkins Ranch are doing some incredible work and leading the way there in the meat side of it, as we spoke to New Zealand Merino around what they're doing with regenerative accreditation. Hugh Jelly from Outer Land is doing some great work, as you mentioned, there as well. But the big thing is that with any sort of change, our farmers and growers see a lot of capital outlay with no premium realistically at the end of it. What are you seeing from these brands prepared to pay more? And when we say more, by how much more to make change?
Yeah. So there's always that kind of, we're in early days of a new movement. And I think there's always that group that's kind of your first mover that sees that there's going to be long-term benefit for this. And so right now as an entity, we're facilitating that connection between those first mover producers and the first mover brands and making connections, and not, it's not a fully systematized, everything's baked, you're going to get this percentage increase in market value. Here's where I'm going to, personally speak from my heart around having to get all the merit badges to go and create market premiums. What I found in my own career is that when selling into the commodity system, you can get all the merit badges that get you those little premiums over time. But typically, unless you're in a producer cooperative that's really kind of baked that into their structure, that just those commodity markets over time, those premiums will wane. They'll dissipate as the program scales. You could see this in organic, you could see it in grass-fed, you could see it in natural, you could see it in non-GMO. It's happened across all of them. Value streams for producers. So we're moving, I would say quickly, but with eyes wide open and with the utmost integrity into this ecosystem service credit market. We want to see producers being paid for the good work they're doing on the land and actually show this is offsetting cost to society. There's a market to brands for that, and there's a market to governments for that. Having real empirical data allows producers to get to that new asset class sooner. And then the other one is whole animal utility. And so I was very proud that with our partnership with Timberland, we were able to, maybe for the first time in modern history, get farmers paid for their hides, raw skins coming off of the abattoir. That money, that premium didn't go to the abattoir alone, it went to the producers as well. So we set up a mechanism where we were able to make payments back to the producer for something that most producers around the world pay a disposal fee for if they take in animals all the way to finish. Working on a project right now to do the same thing with pet. So when we can bring meat buyers and hide buyers and pet buyers together to create more utility for the animal. So it's not just premiums, it's getting paid for things that you weren't getting paid for before.
And I think, as you said, that Scope 3 accounting leads to long-term resilience, the reason why that you went down this path in the first place, Chris. Totally,
yeah. And so that's where again, that asset class resilience, we don't want to be giving away our impact away for free. We want to be creating the mechanisms that the brands can buy direct from farm, get traceability, and get that brand halo of story. But that ultimately, if they want that impact accounting, that's really a new thing that they should have to pay for it to get. And so creating the credits that still work within that notion of insets and offsets to be able to get them that accounting, those subtraction metrics, if you will, that they need, and have farmers get paid for those.
Oh, thank you so much for your time, Chris Kerston, US-based Land to Market program that is coming out of Savory Institute and actively working here in the New Zealand marketplace. We'll put some links to some of those institutions such as Arta Land Regenerative and, of course, Atkins Ranch in the description below on this podcast episode, so that if you do want to get in touch with them, as well as a link to the Savory Institute's Land to Market program as well. Now, after the break, our bees have got a fighting chance. The scientists here have identified naturally occurring compounds that induce a cleaning response among some worker bees, killing juvenile varroa mites. Emeritus Professor Alison Mercer is here on Ceres Country as another changemaker.
This is Ceres Country. Join the conversation. Have thoughts on an interview? Or have you got questions you want answered by a future guest? Let us know. Email sarah@cerescountry.com.
Australia and New Zealand are home to some of the world's most innovative farming pioneers. Zematic is proud to partner with farmers who are committed to leading the way in sustainable water management. The Trailblazer Sustainable Irrigation Awards celebrate sustainable irrigation management, irrigation-driven improvements, waterway protection, and environmental stewardship. See how our Trailblazers are leading the way at irrigationtrailblazer.com/winners.
Well, Farmers Weekly's New Thinking piece by Neil Wallace this week is talking about how our bees here are getting a fighting chance as scientists have identified naturally occurring compounds that induce a cleaning response among some worker bees, killing juvenile varroa mites. Now, varroa mites reproducing in brood cells, and how researchers have identified how some worker bees can open those cells, pull out the contents, and killing the mite. Well, our next guest has retired, but Emeritus Professor Alison Mercer, welcome to Ceres Country, and thank you very much for all the work that you and your team have been involved in, and the University of Otago researchers on this project. How long have you all collectively been working on it?
Well, probably about 8 years or so now, so quite a long time.
And we know the varroa mite has been, a huge worry for our biosecurity, to our very valuable honey industry in New Zealand. The research that has been, whereabouts has that been funded and driven through?
Both the University of Otago and through a collaboration with researchers in France. So the key researcher here was Fanny Mondet, or is Fanny Mondet. She's continuing this work. And Fanny was actually born in France, but she came here, first of all, to my lab at the University of Otago to do a master's degree, and then she went on to do her PhD. And during her PhD studies, she was very keen to try and answer the question, why is it that some honeybee colonies show resistance to varroa mites, whereas most colonies don't? So most colonies, once the varroa mite arrives, they usually don't survive for more than about 2 years without help from the beekeepers. So she wanted to know why some colonies are resistant. And of course, this is a question that people have been interested in all around the world. And so Fanny got this work started and made it a collaborative venture between the University of Otago and the Institute for National Agricultural Research in France.
Fantastic collaboration between the countries, and congratulations to Fanny and all of her work. So without intervention, infected honeybee colonies die within 2 years. So this particular compounds and the way that it actually, the resistance can happen, can you explain that a little bit to us in layman's terms?
Sure. Well, I'll try. So the thing is that mites are tricky. So they are able to camouflage themselves by making their bodies smell like the bodies of bees. So they're hard to detect. So bees find them hard to detect. And despite this, some colonies seem to contain worker bees that are able to detect the mites. And the ones that they can detect are the ones that are inside brood cells. So the brood cells are where the mites reproduce. And brood cells are simply cells that, instead of containing honey, the cell contains, the queen lays an egg in the cell, and the egg develops into a bee. So brood cells can contain developing bees, and the mites reproduce in those cells. And it seems that there are some worker bees that are able to detect the mites in the brood cells. And it turns out that it seems to be the juvenile mites that they detect. And any worker bee that can detect the mites will work collectively with other workers that also can detect the mites, and they open up the cells. The cells are normally capped over with a wax cap. So they open the cell, they kill the developing bee, which sounds pretty drastic, but they do this in order for the next step where they clean out the cells. And in so doing, they also clean out the mites, and so the mite reproduction is disturbed. So this, what is called varroa-sensitive hygiene behaviour, suppresses mite reproduction, and that helps the bees to cope with mites. It doesn't eradicate the mites, but it keeps the mites at a level that the colony can tolerate. So the key question here is, why do some colonies have enough workers to do this and others don't?
And so with the research, how are beekeepers being able to identify within their particular hives and to protect and make the hives more resilient going forward? How are they implementing this research into their businesses?
Well, we hope that they will be able to. At the moment, what beekeepers need to do in order to control mites and protect their colonies is they need to use miticides. And the problem with miticides is the mites rapidly become resistant to the miticides. The miticides start appearing in the honey, and miticides are expensive and not very environmentally friendly. Now, what Fanny has found is that these compounds that she's discovered are only found in brood cells that contain reproducing mites. And moreover, if she puts these compounds into cells that don't contain any mites, the workers that can detect the compounds think there are mites in the cell. So she has shown, and collaborative, the researchers have shown, that if you inject these compounds into cells, it will trigger varroa-sensitive hygiene behaviour. So it answers two questions. What is the signal that the worker bees are using, and what is it that triggers this important hygiene behaviour? Now, because we know that, we can now hopefully design a tool where beekeepers or bee breeders are able to inject the compounds into cells. And the important thing is that the responses they induce mimic the natural varroa-sensitive hygiene behaviour. So in other words, it gives you a measure of how resistant the colonies are to the varroa mites. So if you inject these compounds into brood cells and you go away and the next day you come and have a look and all the cells have been opened up, so there's been a very strong response, you know that that colony is likely to be resistant to the varroa mite. So it's a way of selecting the colonies, which would be we hope is going to be a very useful tool for bee breeders.
Absolutely. What work is Fanny doing in extension with Apiculture New Zealand Beekeepers Association to move this forward and to move forward with that tool? What's the sort of time frame?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, she's shown very clearly that if you use these synthesized versions of these compounds, they work. The next key thing is to find a delivery technique. So she and the people who have been helping her have been injecting individual cells, with these compounds, and that takes time. And no beekeeper or bee breeder has that as much time. So what they're working on now is some delivery tool that would be robust, reliable, and inexpensive, because if we can produce a delivery tool like that, then that would be a great benefit to beekeepers and bee breeders alike.
What a fantastic piece of research. Thank you so much, Emeritus Professor Alison Mercer of Otago University's Department of Zoology, speaking there on behalf of Fanny Mondo's work as a doctoral candidate, working in there with the French as well, French researchers. A great combination collaboration between France and New Zealand to work on what is a global issue with varroa mite. Now, after the break, we're joined by Dairy Environment Leaders Chair Melissa Slattery from Wellington, from the Dairy Environment Leaders Annual Forum, to talk about how they are rising to meet environmental challenges and support each other through this change. We're going to get an update from Melissa on the thoughts that have come out of the rooms of Wellington.
This is Sarah's Country, produced in alliance with Farmers Weekly, the place New Zealand farmers turn to for a trusted source of in-depth agricultural journalism. Stay connected to the matters that matter most by subscribing to My Daily Digest at farmersweekly.co.nz.
Well, it's important to talk about change makers, but also those supporting people through change. And rising to meet environmental challenges is the Dairy Environment Leaders Annual Forum, which is happening right now in Wellington. Dairy Environment Leaders are leading farmers from across the country to work with other farmers, their communities and decision makers to drive positive change. The forum is timely as the sector responds to climate change and water quality regulations, and farmers are supported to make profitable and sustainable practices in light of this. Dairy Environment Leaders Chair Melissa Slattery joins us now from Wellington. Melissa, I understand the theme of the forum is Manaaki Kaitanga, supporting through change. Who are the speakers that you've had at the forum to sort of guide that conversation?
We've had many great inspirational speakers that are both challenging but also inspiring us on the change journey. So we've had Dr. Rod Carr speak with us. We've had the Minister James Shaw speak with us. We've had a panel discussion with CEOs of Z Energy and Contact Energy, and we've just had a great day, jam-packed full of awesome speakers.
Obviously, my biggest question is some key points that it stood out for you and feedback from those dairy leaders and what they're hearing.
That we're all in this together. Climate, we're all needing to make changes in our lives, and how we go about that. We don't have or know all the solutions just yet, but we're taking steps to make positive change on farm and in our communities, and that's sector-wide, and it'll affect all New Zealanders.
What did you feel the support through change from Minister James Shaw and Dr. Rod Carr?
Yeah, absolutely. They know that we are working through what we can do on farm. We've got the Hawaka Ekanoa partnership. There's opportunities where we work together to find those solutions and move forward.
And what about the government's significant investment in both R&D and broadband to support changes farmers need to make?
Yeah, well, that was a recommendation in the Climate Commission's report, and that's really positive to see because, like everyone knows, we don't have all the solutions. So if we can find the new emerging technologies together and get that investment to achieve those outcomes, then that's really positive for everybody.
And what about the growth of the Dairy Environment Leaders Forum that was formed by Dairy NZ in 2013? Are you seeing many more coming on board, and what's the expansion of this group looking like?
So we've got 40 dairy environment leaders at the National Forum, and we're looking to roll out some regional events and grow our environment leaders across the country. These 40 are geographically spread and in their communities. So we're looking forward to growing the movement.
Fantastic, and a movement it is that you've certainly created. Congratulations on all that you're doing. To have all those voices together in one room is a significant leap from where we were even 5 years ago, Melissa. So congratulations, and I understand you're continuing on tomorrow.
Yes, yep, we've got another big day tomorrow with a lot more inspirational speakers, so looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, dairy farmer and the chair of the Dairy Environment Leaders Group, Melissa Slattery, joining us there out of Wellington. Fantastic to see how far we have come. Just reading here, we all want the same things: clean water, low emissions and a strong economy. But we can't solve the challenges ahead in isolation, and all New Zealanders need to make change. And that is why I'm super passionate about our Changemaker series here on Sarah's Country. It is a place to find inspiration and feel supported, to embrace change and feel supported through change. So I hope that you are enjoying it, and I'd love to hear from you. Please message me across all social medias, Sarah's Country on Facebook, Instagram, as well as, of course, sarahscountry.com. You can also get in touch with me via email, sarah@sarahscountry.com. And, of course, you may have heard in earlier episodes that we are looking for a change maker to interview on site at the South Island Agricultural Field Days next week, held at Kerwee. I'd love you to nominate if you are on display with your business, or if you know of someone who will be, for us to turn up with the cameras and, of course, highlight on the ground the great innovative solutions that they are or you are bringing. So send me an email and get in your nominations so that we can, of course, cover it off, and we'll showcase that interview on a Changemaker coming up into the future. And that is all we've got time for this week. We'll be back with our Newsmaker Mondays live from 7 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube, as well as, of course, on podcast. In the meantime, have a great rest of your week. I will be at Central District's Field Days on Thursday in the Farmlands tent if you want to come along and say g'day. And otherwise, have a great weekend as well, wherever you are around the country or around the globe. And we'll hear from you. See you again next week. Ka kite anō.